I never told my daughter what I'd been hiding in the basement of my toy shop in downtown. When she started plotting with the gold digger she'd been cheating with, I made sure everything was being carefully documented. One afternoon while I was upstairs, my shop assistant called me, voice trembling. "You need to come down here now. Your daughter is in the basement." I'd been waiting for this moment for 3 years, and the evidence I'd prepared was about to destroy the fantasy world she'd built. "I'm grateful you're here." Before I reveal what happened in that basement, comment, protect. If you believe love sometimes means protecting people from themselves even when it hurts. Quick note, this story uses fictional elements to convey real lessons about family greed and redemption. The message matters. There's a particular kind of silence that fills a toy shop after closing time. It's not empty, not really. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the whispers of childhood laughter, the echo of Christmas mornings, the soft hum of music boxes that haven't played in decades. I've spent 40 years learning to hear those sounds. My name is Walter Hayes, and I'm 66 years old. Most folks around Charleston know me as the man who fixes broken toys. But that's not quite the whole truth. Hayes's Toy Restoration sits on Upper King Street, tucked between a boutique coffee shop and an antique bookstore. The building itself is a 2-story red brick structure from the 1890s, with arched windows that catch the afternoon sun just right. The wooden sign hanging above the door, hand-carved and painted in forest green and gold, has weathered 40 years of hurricane seasons and tourist floods. But this shop remains. Constant. Reliable. Inside, the scent is unmistakable old wood, linseed oil, and thyme itself. Shelves line every wall, crowded with treasures, waiting for someone to love them again. Wooden dolls with painted faces. Tin trains from the 1940s, their wheels frozen mid-journey. Rocking horses with real horsehair manes. Music boxes that once played lullabies for children now grown old. Every single piece has a story. Every crack, every chip, every missing button tells me something about the hands that held it, the hearts that cherished it. People think I fix toys, but what I really do is preserve memories. My workshop is in the basement. A narrow set of wooden stairs leads down to where the real work happens. That's where I spend most of my time these days, hunched over a workbench under a brass lamp Dorothy bought me 4 decades ago. Dorothy, my wife. The woman who taught me this trade, who believed a broken toy wasn't trash. It was a second chance. She passed away 17 years ago, but some mornings I swear I can still smell her lavender perfume drifting through the aisles. She used to say, "Walter, you don't just fix toys. You fix broken things. That's who you are." I didn't fully understand what she meant back then. I thought she was talking about dolls and trains. But Dorothy always saw deeper. She saw people. She saw hearts. And she saw the cracks long before they became breaks. I wish she were here now. I wish I could ask her if I did the right thing. It's January 2026. The winter air is crisp over Charleston. A cold mist hangs over the Cooper River in violent shades of pink and purple, and tourists are returning in droves, but I barely notice anymore. For the past 2 years, I've been living in the aftermath of something I never imagined I'd have to do. 5 years ago, my life changed. Not in the way you'd expect, no sudden accident, no illness. It was quieter than that. More insidious. It started with small things, a conversation that felt off, a question, asked too casually, a look in my daughter's eyes that I didn't recognize. And over time, those small things grew into something I couldn't ignore. Rachel, my daughter, my only child. 33 years old, smart as a whip, beautiful like her mother. For most of her life, she was everything I could have hoped for. But somewhere along the way, somewhere between innocence and ambition, she became someone I didn't know. Someone Dorothy would have wept to see. I won't lie, there were moments I wanted to look away, to pretend I didn't see what was happening. But I'm a man who spent 4 decades examining cracks in 100-year-old porcelain. I know when something is breaking. And I knew my daughter was breaking, not in the way that asks for help, but in the way that breaks others. So I did what I do best. I observed, I documented, I waited. And when the time came, I acted. This shop became more than a business during those 5 years. It became a vault. Not for money, though there's value here. Not for antiques, though collectors would pay dearly for some pieces. No, this place became a vault for truth, for evidence, for the kind of secrets that families bury deep and never speak of again. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You don't know about Kenneth, the son-in-law I loved more than my own daughter by the end. You don't know about Brett, the man who nearly destroyed everything Dorothy and I built. You don't know about the 3 years I spent watching my child plan against me, writing it all down, hiding proof in places only a toy maker would think to look. And you don't know about the night everything came to light, the night I sat across from Rachel in a private dining room overlooking the Cooper River and played her a recording she never knew existed. I'm not proud of what I had to do, but I'm not ashamed either. Because here's the thing about fixing broken things. Sometimes you have to take them apart completely before you can put them back together. Sometimes the only way to save something is to let it fall. Dorothy knew that. She tried to tell me in her own way before she passed. She left me tools I didn't understand at the time, tools I only learned to use when I had no other choice. So here I am, 2 years later, standing in a shop full of restored toys, wondering if I'll ever be able to restore my own family. Wondering if Rachel will ever forgive me. Wondering if I'll ever forgive her. This is the story of how I lost my daughter, saved my family's legacy, and learned that sometimes the things we treasure most become the things that save us. It started 5 years ago, but really it started long before that. It started the day Dorothy looked at our infant daughter and whispered, "She's going to need you, Walter, more than she'll ever know." And God help me, she was right. 17 years ago, in the fall of 2009, I learned what it meant to lose half of yourself. Dorothy was 47 when the cancer came back for the 3rd time. The doctors at MUSC Medical University of South Carolina had done everything they could. Chemotherapy, radiation, experimental treatments that cost more than our house. But cancer doesn't care how much you love someone. By September, we brought her home. She wanted to die in our bed, with the windows open so she could hear the church bells from St. Philip's down the street. Rachel was 14 then, just starting high school at Charleston County School of the Arts. She'd come home after school and sit at the foot of her mother's bed, doing homework, while Dorothy drifted in and out of sleep. Dorothy had always been the backbone of our family. She was the one who'd started the toy restoration business 30 years earlier, back when Upper King Street was still rough, and nobody thought fixing old toys could make a living. People will always want to hold on to their childhoods, Walter, she'd told me when we were newlyweds. We just have to give them a reason to believe it's possible. She taught me everything. How to identify wood types by grain. How to mix paint to match century-old porcelain. How to rebuild clockwork mechanisms that hadn't ticked in decades. But more than that, she taught me patience. She taught me that restoration wasn't about making something new, it was about honoring what it had been. You fix broken things, Walter. She told me one afternoon, her voice barely a whisper. The morphine made her words float, disconnected and dreamy. That's who you are. Not just toys, relationships, trust, families. You see the cracks, and you don't run from them. You fill them in. I'd smiled, squeezed her hand. You taught me that. No. Her eyes, once bright green like spring leaves, were dull now. I just showed you what you already were. We didn't talk much about Rachel those last weeks. It hurt Dorothy too much, not physically, but deeper. She loved our daughter fiercely, but she saw things in Rachel that I didn't want to see. A hunger, a restlessness, an obsession with what other kids had: newer clothes, better phones, vacations we couldn't afford. She's 14, I'd said once. All teenagers want things. It's not about wanting, Walter. Dorothy turned her head on the pillow. It's about needing. She doesn't just want nice things. She needs them to feel valuable. And that terrifies me. 2 weeks before Dorothy passed, her lawyer came to the house. Robert Daniels, a good man, patient and kind. He brought papers for Dorothy to sign. A trust fund for Rachel separate from our regular accounts. $1.2 million carefully invested over the years. She'll need guidance, Dorothy told me after Robert left. Her breathing was labored, each word an effort. The money is for her future, but you have to protect it until she's ready. Don't let her have it all at once, Walter. She's not ready. She might never be ready. I'd promised. What else could I do? 3 days before the end, Dorothy asked me to bring something from the shop. A music box we'd restored together years ago, one of the first pieces we'd ever worked on as a couple. French from the 1890s with a hand-painted porcelain lid showing a couple dancing under cherry blossoms. It played La Vie en Rose, that old Edith Piaf song Dorothy used to hum while she worked. I brought it upstairs and set it on the nightstand. "This is for you," she said. "Keep it somewhere safe." "Dorothy, it's yours. You love this piece." "Not anymore." She managed a small smile. "It's yours now. And Walter?" She reached for my hand, her fingers cold and fragile. "This will help you when the time comes." "What time? What are you talking about?" "You'll know." Her eyes were already closing. "Trust me. You'll know." I didn't understand. The morphine, I thought. The illness scrambling her thoughts. But I made a promise anyway, the way you do when someone you love is leaving, and you'd promise them the moon if they asked. Dorothy died on a Sunday morning in October. The bells from St. Philip's were ringing for the 10 o'clock service. Rachel was asleep in her room. I was holding Dorothy's hand when she took her last breath, so quiet I almost didn't notice. One moment she was there, and the next she was simply gone. The funeral was small. We buried her at Magnolia Cemetery under a live oak tree. Rachel cried until she had no tears left. I stood there in my suit, numb, and lost holding that music box, because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. 17 years later, I finally understand what Dorothy was trying to tell me. She knew. Somehow she knew that one day I'd need more than memories to save our family. She knew that Rachel would lose her way, and she left me a tool, a beautiful, delicate, impossible tool that would change everything. But back then, standing at her grave with our teenage daughter sobbing into my shoulder, all I had was a music box, a trust fund I didn't quite understand, and a promise to protect a girl who would one day need protecting from herself. The years after Dorothy's death were quiet ones. Rachel threw herself into school. I threw myself into work. We moved around each other like ghosts in the same house, both of us afraid to acknowledge the hole Dorothy had left behind. I thought time would heal us. I thought Rachel would grow out of her restlessness. I was wrong. 10 years passed before I saw the cracks Dorothy had warned me about. By 2019, Rachel was 26 years old and seemed to have everything figured out. She'd graduated from College of Charleston with a degree in business administration, landed a solid job as HR manager at Palmetto Consulting Group, a mid-sized firm downtown with offices overlooking the harbor. She dressed sharp-spoke confidently and had built a life that looked from the outside like success. And she'd married Kenneth Palmer. Kenneth was 28, a civil engineer who worked for the city planning department. tall, soft-spoken with kind eyes and a handshake that felt honest. He'd proposed to Rachel at Waterfront Park down by the Pineapple Fountain, where tourists took their photos. They'd gotten married the following spring in a small ceremony at Middleton Place, surrounded by blooming magnolias and a handful of close friends. I liked Kenneth immediately, maybe even loved him in the way you can love someone who treats your daughter the way she deserves. He was steady, reliable, the kind of man who showed up early, held doors open, and remembered birthdays without being reminded. When they'd come by the shop on Sunday afternoons, Kenneth would wander the aisles genuinely interested in the toys, asking questions about the history of each piece. He had respect for craftsmanship, for history, for the things that mattered. For the first year of their marriage, I thought Rachel had finally found her footing. She seemed happy, settled. The restlessness Dorothy had worried about appeared to have faded. I'd watch them together, Kenneth's hand on the small of her back, Rachel leaning into him, laughing at his quiet jokes, and I'd think, Dorothy, you were wrong. Our girl turned out just fine. But then in May of 2019, something shifted. It started small. Rachel stopped coming by the shop as often. She'd been in the habit of visiting every Sunday after church, bringing pastries from Callie's Hot Little Biscuit, and sitting with me in the workshop while I worked. We'd talk about her week, about Kenneth, about the renovations they were planning for their townhouse in Charleston Village. But May came, and those Sunday visits grew sparse. 1 week then, 2, then a month would go by. When I'd call, she'd apologize. Work was crazy, she was exhausted. She and Kenneth had plans. Reasonable excuses, the kind any busy young couple would give. Except when she did visit, she was different. The conversations changed. She stopped asking about the shop, about my health, about whether I needed help with anything. Instead, she started asking different questions, questions that felt calculated. Dad, have you thought about what this building is worth? Upper King is booming right now. Property values are insane. Do you have an updated appraisal on the house? You know, for insurance purposes. What's your retirement plan look like? Are you thinking about selling the business eventually? At first, I told myself she was just being practical. She worked in HR, dealt with benefits and planning all day. Maybe she was just trying to make sure her old man was taken care of. But there was something in her tone, something sharp and measuring, that reminded me of the way people assess furniture at estate sales. And then there was the way she treated Kenneth during those visits. She'd snap at him for small things, interrupt him mid-sentence, roll her eyes when he'd try to contribute to the conversation. Once, when Kenneth complimented a rocking horse I'd just restored, Rachel said, "It's just an old toy, Ken. You don't have to suck up to my dad." Kenneth had looked like she'd slapped him. I'd changed the subject quickly, but the moment stuck with me. By July, I started keeping a mental tally. Rachel had visited 3 times in 2 months. Each time she'd steered the conversation toward money, assets, property. Each time she'd been cold to Kenneth. And each time she'd left in a hurry, checking her phone, constantly distracted. Then came August. Rachel showed up on a Wednesday afternoon unannounced. Kenneth wasn't with her. She said he was working late. She seemed agitated, pacing the shop floor while I finished repainting a tin soldier's uniform. "Dad, I need to ask you something." I set down my brush. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" "The trust fund Mom set up for me, the one you manage." She crossed her arms, leaning against my workbench. "How much is in it exactly?" I kept my voice steady. "Your mother wanted it protected until you were ready." "I'm 26 years old. I'm married. I have a career. How much more ready do I need to be?" "It's not about age, Rachel. It's about how much Dad." There it was. Not concern, not curiosity, demand. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. The set of her jaw, the flash in her eyes. the way her fingers drummed against her arm, impatient and hungry. And for the first time since Dorothy died, I heard my wife's voice clearly in my head. She needs them to feel valuable, and that terrifies me. 1.2 million, I said quietly. But it's locked in a trust. Your mother's instructions were very specific. Rachel's eyes widened. She hadn't known the exact amount. I could see her mind working, calculating. Then she smiled a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Well, that's good to know, for planning purposes. She left 20 minutes later. Didn't ask how I was doing, didn't mention Kenneth. Just got in her car and drove away. I stood in the empty shop for a long time after she left, listening to the silence Dorothy used to fill. And I made a decision. I would watch, I would wait. I would document everything, because something was very, very wrong with my daughter. And this time I wasn't going to pretend I didn't see it. His name was Brett Sullivan, and the first time Rachel mentioned him, I should have paid more attention. It was early February 2020. Rachel had called me on a Tuesday evening, rare enough that I'd answered on the first ring, worried something was wrong. But her voice had been bright, almost giddy. Dad, we hired a new intern at work. Brett Sullivan. He's 24, just finished his MBA at Charleston Southern. Super smart, really ambitious. He's been shadowing me in HR, and honestly, he's a natural. I'd made some polite comment, asked a few questions. Where was he from? What made him want to work in human resources? Rachel had answers for everything. Brett was from Columbia originally. He'd chosen HR because he liked working with people, understanding what motivated them. He was interested in organizational psychology. He reminds me of Kenneth, actually, Rachel had said. Thoughtful, detail-oriented. That comparison should have been a warning. By March, Brett's name had woven itself into nearly every conversation. Brett suggested we try a new applicant tracking system. Brett helped me reorganize the benefits packages. Brett thinks I should apply for the senior HR manager position when it opens up. Brett this, Brett that. Kenneth noticed too. One Sunday when they'd stopped by for lunch, he'd made a joke about it. Sounds like this Brett guy is running the whole company, he'd said, trying to keep his tone light. Rachel had shot him a look that could freeze water. Don't be insecure, Ken. He's 24. He's just enthusiastic about the work. The way she'd said Ken, dismissive, almost contemptuous, had made my stomach turn. Then, in mid-March, Rachel asked if she could bring Brett by the shop. He's really into vintage stuff, she'd explained over the phone. Antiques, history, all that. I told him about your restoration work and he's been dying to see the place. Would that be okay? I'd said yes, of course. Curiosity, mainly. I wanted to see who this Brett Sullivan was. They arrived on a Saturday afternoon. I was in the front room rewiring the internal mechanism of a 1950s dancing ballerina when the bell above the door chimed. Rachel walked in first, dressed more casually than usual, jeans and a silk blouse, her hair down in waves. Behind her came Brett. He was younger than I'd expected. Baby-faced, with carefully styled dark hair and a smile that showed too many teeth. He wore chinos and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, just so like he'd seen it in a magazine spread about young professionals. Good-looking, I suppose, in that generic way that comes from gyms and expensive haircuts. Mr. Hayes. He strode forward, hand extended. Brett Sullivan. Rachel's told me so much about this place. It's an honor to meet you. His handshake was firm, practiced, the kind of handshake people learn in business seminars. Call me Walter, I said, stepping back to give him space. She welcomed to Hayes's toy restoration. For the next 45 minutes, Brett made all the right moves. He admired the inventory, asked intelligent questions about the restoration process, listened attentively when I explained the history of a particular German clockwork toy from the 1920s. He even complimented my craftsmanship, saying things like, "This is a dying art. People don't appreciate handwork like this anymore." But the whole time something felt off. It was the way his eyes moved. He wasn't looking at the toys the way collectors do, with wonder, with nostalgia. He was looking at them the way appraisers do, cataloging, assessing value. When he thought I wasn't watching, his gaze would drift to the crown molding, to the original hardwood floors, to the large display windows facing King Street. He was measuring the building. Rachel watched him the entire time. Not me, not the toys, him. And whenever he said something complimentary, she'd light up like a teenager with a crush. After they left Brett with promises to visit again, Rachel with a quick peck on my cheek, I stood in the doorway and watched them walk down King Street together. They weren't touching, but they walked too close. Their body language was too comfortable, too familiar. 2 days later, Rachel called. "Dad, have you ever thought about selling the shop?" I'd been expecting something, but not that. "Why would I sell?" "Well, you're not getting any younger. And this location, Dad, it's prime real estate. Upper King is exploding right now. Developers are buying up everything. You could sell for a fortune and retire comfortably. Maybe travel. Enjoy life." "I enjoy life now," I said carefully. "And this shop is your mother's legacy. Mom's been gone for over 10 years. Things change. You could—" "I'm not selling, Rachel." There was a pause. Then, in a cooler voice, "Okay, just a thought. Brett mentioned that a building near yours just sold for over $1 million. I wanted you to know what your options are." Brett mentioned. After we hung up, I sat in my workshop for a long time thinking about that visit. About the way Brett had looked at my life's work, like it was inventory. About the way Rachel had looked at him like he held answers she'd been searching for. And I thought about Kenneth. Where had he been that Saturday? Why hadn't Rachel invited her husband to tour the shop with her colleague? By June, my suspicions had hardened into something closer to certainty. Rachel's Sunday visits stopped altogether. When I'd call, she'd be distracted, her attention somewhere else. In the background, I could sometimes hear her phone buzzing with text messages. She'd laugh at something on her screen, a bright, breathless laugh I hadn't heard her make around Kenneth in months. I'd seen Kenneth twice in June. Both times he'd looked hollow, exhausted. When I'd asked him how he was, he'd just said, "Busy, work's been crazy." But it wasn't work. I could see it in his eyes. The way they wouldn't quite meet mine. The way his shoulders slumped. Kenneth knew something was wrong. He just didn't want to admit it yet. And I couldn't tell him. Not without proof. Not without destroying my daughter's marriage based on a father's intuition and a bad feeling about a 24-year-old intern with a practiced smile. So I did the only thing I could do. I waited. I watched. And I started keeping more detailed notes. Because Brett Sullivan had entered our lives and nothing was going to be the same. Kenneth came to the shop on a Thursday in late July 2021, alone. I was upstairs pricing a collection of tin soldiers someone had brought in for appraisal when I heard the bell. Anna Williams, my shop assistant for the past 15 years, called up the stairs. "Walter Kenneth's here to see you." Something in her voice made me set down my work immediately. I found him standing in the main room, hands shoved deep in his pockets, staring at a shelf of wooden trains without really seeing them. He'd lost weight. His face looked drawn, older than his 30 years. Dark circles pooled under his eyes like bruises. "Kenneth." I crossed the room and gripped his shoulder. "You look like you haven't slept in a week." "Closer to a month," he said, attempting a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Do you have a few minutes? I need to talk to you about something." We went down to my workshop. I poured us both coffee from the pot I keep on a hot plate, black, strong, the way construction workers and insomniacs take it. Kenneth wrapped both hands around the mug like he was trying to absorb its warmth. For a long moment, he just sat there staring into the dark liquid. Something's wrong with Rachel Walter. His voice cracked on her name. She's different, and I don't know what to do about it. I'd been expecting this conversation for months, dreading it really, but I kept my face neutral, my voice steady. Different how? Kenneth set down the mug and rubbed his face with both hands. She's working late all the time. 3-4 nights a week, she doesn't get home until 9 or 10 o'clock. When I ask her about it, she says it's a big project. Deadlines. You know how it is. And you don't believe her. I want to. He looked up at me and the pain in his eyes was almost unbearable. God, Walter, I want to believe her. But she won't let me near her phone anymore. She used to leave it on the counter face up. Now she keeps it in her purse, password protected. If I'm in the room and it buzzes, she'll take it to another room to check it. And if I ask who's texting, she gets defensive. Says I'm being paranoid. I said nothing. Just let him talk. And in the bedroom, Kenneth's voice dropped to almost a whisper. We haven't been intimate in 3 months. Every time I try, she says she's tired, or she has a headache, or she just turns away from me without saying anything at all. He laughed bitterly. I feel like I'm living with a stranger who happens to look like my wife. Have you talked to her? Really talked? I've tried. She shuts down, changes the subject. Or worse, she turns it around on me. Says I'm being clingy, that I don't trust her, that I'm making problems where there aren't any. He picked up the coffee again, took a long drink. But Walter, there's something else. I waited. She keeps asking me questions. About you, about your finances. Kenneth met my eyes. She wanted to know if you have life insurance. How much? Who the beneficiary is. She asked if you've updated your will recently, if you've talked to a lawyer. My chest tightened, but I kept my expression calm. What did you tell her? That I didn't know. That it wasn't my business. He set the mug down hard enough that coffee sloshed over the rim. But it scared me, Walter. The way she asked, like she was calculating something. Has she talked to you about money, about your finances together? Constantly. She wants to know exactly how much we have saved, what our retirement accounts look like. She keeps saying we should be more aggressive with investments, that we're not building wealth fast enough. Kenneth's hands curled into fists. We're doing fine, Walter. We're comfortable, but it's like nothing is ever enough for her. I thought about Rachel's visit last August. The trust fund question, the coldness in her eyes when I'd told her the amount. Kenneth, I said carefully, has she mentioned anyone at work, anyone she's been spending time with? His jaw tightened. You mean Brett? So he knew the name. She talks about him all the time. Kenneth continued, his voice hardening. Brett thinks this. Brett says that. Brett helped her with some project that kept her at the office until midnight on a Friday. When I suggested maybe this Brett should learn some boundaries, she accused me of being jealous of her professional relationships. Are you jealous, I mean? Kenneth looked me straight in the eye. I don't know anymore. Maybe I am. But Walter, it's more than that. She smiles at her phone now, these little secret smiles. And she started dressing differently. Nicer. Taking longer to get ready in the morning. Wearing perfume she used to save for special occasions. Every word confirmed what I'd been suspecting. But I couldn't tell him. Not yet. Not without proof. that would hold up to more than a father's intuition and a husband's fear. "What are you going to do?" I asked instead. Kenneth was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw with emotion. "I love her, Walter. I'd do anything to save our marriage. I've suggested counseling. She says we don't need it. I've tried planning date nights. She cancels at the last minute. I've asked her what I can do differently, and she says nothing's wrong." He looked down at his hands. "But I don't know if she still loves me. And I'm terrified of what it means if she doesn't." I wanted to tell him everything. About Brett's visit to the shop, about the way Rachel had looked at him, about my own growing certainty that something terrible was unfolding. But what could I say? That I suspected my daughter was having an affair based on nothing but instinct. Give it time, I said, hating how hollow the words sounded. Sometimes people go through phases. Work stress, life transitions. Kenneth stood setting the empty mug on my workbench. "Yeah, maybe." But we both knew he didn't believe it. At the door, he turned back. "If she talks to you, if she says anything about me, about us, will you let me know?" "Of course." After he left, I sat alone in my workshop listening to the old buildings settle around me. The guilt sat heavy in my chest. Kenneth deserved the truth, but I couldn't give it to him. Not yet. I pulled out my notebook, the one I'd started keeping after Rachel's trust fund question, and began to write. July 29th, 2021. Kenneth came to the shop. He knows something is wrong. He suspects Brett Sullivan. Rachel is asking about my life insurance and will. Kenneth is trying to save the marriage. Rachel is already gone. I needed proof. Hard evidence. Something more than suspicion and broken hearts. And I was going to find it. After Kenneth left that Thursday, I didn't go back upstairs. I stayed in my workshop, surrounded by the familiar smell of wood glue and old paint, and tried to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do. It was August 2021. 18 months since Brett Sullivan had walked into our lives. 12 months since Rachel had asked about the trust fund. 1 month since Kenneth had sat in this same chair and told me his marriage was dying. I had suspicions. I had patterns. I had the sick feeling in my gut that every parent gets when they realize their child is not who they thought they were. But I didn't have proof. The logical thing would be to confront Rachel, to sit her down and ask directly, "Are you having an affair? Are you planning something?" But every time I imagined that conversation, I heard Dorothy's voice stopping me. Dorothy used to say I had a gift for restoration, not just toys, but trust relationships, families. But some breaks run too deep, and if you try to repair them too soon before you understand the damage, you'll only make it worse. If I confronted Rachel now, she'd deny everything. She'd twist it around, make me the paranoid father, Kenneth the jealous husband. She'd go underground with whatever she was doing. And if there really was a plan, if she really was plotting something, she'd destroy the evidence before I could protect myself. Confrontation wasn't the answer. I needed documentation, evidence. Something that would hold up in court if it came to that. Something that would protect the estate Dorothy had spent 30 years building. I needed to watch, to wait, to document. The next morning I drove to Office Depot and bought a small black notebook. Nothing fancy, just a moleskin with lined pages and an elastic band. Small enough to hide. Back at the shop, I cleared out the bottom drawer of my workbench, pushed aside old receipts and broken mechanisms, created a space in the back behind a stack of paint-stained rags. The drawer had a lock. I was the only one with the key. I opened the notebook to the first page and wrote August 1st, 2021. Then I began to document everything. I started with what I knew for certain: Rachel's questions about the trust fund, the visit with Brett Sullivan and his appraising eyes, the conversation about selling the shop, Kenneth's deteriorating marriage, the phone secrecy, the late nights. Then I went back further, reconstructing memories. Every odd comment, every deflection, every time Rachel had steered a conversation toward money or property or my health. It took me 3 hours to fill the first 10 pages. When Anna arrived to open the shop at 9, she found me still in the workshop, hunched over my notebook. "Morning, Walter." She paused in the doorway, coffee in hand. "You've been here all night." "Just thinking," I said, closing the notebook quickly. Anna Williams had worked for me since 2006. She was in her early 50s now, with silver-streaked hair and reading glasses on a beaded chain. She'd been Dorothy's friend, first mine second. She knew the shop inside and out. "Thinking or worrying?" she asked gently. "Maybe both." She came down the stairs, set her coffee on the workbench. "Does this have anything to do with Rachel?" I looked up sharply. "Why would you say that?" "Because you're not the only one who notices things, Walter." Anna crossed her arms. "She hasn't been by in months, and when she does call, you get this look afterward, like you've been gut-punched. It's complicated. It always is with family." She studied me. "Dorothy used to say you carry too much alone, that you think asking for help makes you weak. I'm not asking for help because there's nothing anyone can do." I stood, sliding the notebook into my back pocket. "Some things you have to handle yourself." Anna didn't push. She never did, just nodded and headed back upstairs. "I'm here if you change your mind." After she left, I added a note: "Anna suspects something. Keep documentation private." That afternoon, I called Robert Daniels. Robert had been Dorothy's lawyer, then mine. He'd handled the trust fund, drawn up my will. He was in his late 50s now, with wire-rimmed glasses and a calm, methodical way of thinking. "Walter," he greeted me when I arrived at his office on Broad Street. "What brings you by?" "I need to talk about protecting my estate." His expression shifted to professional concern. "Has something happened?" "Not yet," I said, "but I think it might." Over the next hour, I told him about Rachel's questions, about the trust fund, about Kenneth's suspicions. I gave Robert enough to understand that I was worried my daughter might be planning something. Robert listened without interrupting. When I finished, he steepled his fingers under his chin. "If you're concerned about undue influence," he said finally, "we can take steps. Update the will. Add clauses that make inheritance contingent on certain conditions. Create a paper trail that demonstrates your clear intentions." "How long would that take?" "A few weeks to draft. Another week for notarization and witnesses." He pulled out a legal pad. "But Walter, if you really believe Rachel is planning something harmful, you need more than legal protection. You need evidence." "I know," I said. "I'm working on it." I didn't tell him about the notebook. Some things you keep close. That night, back in my workshop, I opened the notebook again. The pages were already filling up: dates, conversations, observations. Kenneth's visit. Rachel's questions. Brett's calculating eyes. I thought about Dorothy. About the music box she'd left me still sitting in its place of honor on the shelf above my workbench. About her warning that Rachel would need guidance. About the trust fund she'd protected so carefully. She'd known. Somehow she'd known that one day I'd need to protect our daughter from herself. I made a final entry: met with Robert Daniels. Legal protections in progress. From now on, I document everything. Every conversation, every question, every warning sign. I closed the notebook, locked it in the drawer, and sat there in the silence of my workshop. I didn't know it then, But this decision to watch, to wait, to document, would shape the next 4.5 years of my life. And I would document everything in a way no one would ever expect. The phone rang at 11:14 on a Tuesday night in September. I'd been in bed for an hour, not sleeping, just lying there in the dark, thinking about the notebook now locked in my workshop drawer. When the phone buzzed on my nightstand, I knew before I answered that something had broken. "Walter." Kenneth's voice cracked like thin ice. "I need you. Can you come over?" I was dressed and in my truck within 5 minutes. Kenneth lived in a townhouse in Charleston Village, one of those narrow, historic places with Charleston green shutters and a front porch barely wide enough for 2 chairs. When I pulled up, he was sitting on those steps, his head in his hands, still wearing his work clothes. I sat down beside him, didn't say anything, just waited. "She's having an affair." The words came out flat dead. "I know it now. I have proof." "Tell me what happened." Kenneth lifted his head. His eyes were red-rimmed hollow. "She said she had to work late tonight. Big presentation tomorrow, needed to finish the slides. I believed her at first. I always believe her." He laughed bitterly. But something felt off. So I drove to her office around 8:30. And her car wasn't there. The parking lot was almost empty. No lights on in the Palmetto building. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands. So I used Find My Phone. We're still on the same family plan. She doesn't know I can track her location. He showed me the screen, a map of downtown Charleston with a blue dot pulsing on Meeting Street several blocks from her office. I drove there. Kenneth continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's an apartment building, one of those new luxury complexes near Marion Square. And Walter, her car was parked right out front. Her silver Accord, the one with the College of Charleston sticker on the back window." My chest tightened. "What did you do?" I sat there for 20 minutes, just staring at that building. There are maybe 40 units in there. I didn't know which one. Didn't know if I should go in, start knocking on doors like some crazy person. He wiped his eyes roughly. "I took pictures. The building, the address, her car. Then I drove home and waited." "What time did she get back?" 10:30. Walked in smiling, kissed me on the cheek, said the presentation was finally done. Asked me how my day was. His voice broke completely. "She lied right to my face, Walter, and she was so calm about it." I put my hand on his shoulder. He was trembling. "She's having an affair," he said again, as if saying it enough times would make it hurt less. "I know it. What do I do?" The question hung in the night air between us. I thought about the notebook, about Brett Sullivan's appraising eyes, about Rachel's questions regarding my life insurance and will, pieces of a puzzle I'd been slowly assembling for months. "Do you know who?" I asked carefully. Kenneth's jaw tightened. "I think it's someone from work. She mentions Brett constantly. Brett this, Brett that. It's always Brett." He looked at me. "You met him, didn't you, last year?" "I did." "Is he—" Kenneth stopped, seemed to reconsider the question. "Never mind. It doesn't matter who he is. What matters is my wife is with him instead of with me." I chose my words carefully. "Kenneth, I know this is painful, but I need to ask you something important. Don't confront her yet." He stared at me. "What, Walter, she's—" "I know. But if you confront her now, she'll deny it. She'll delete messages, cover her tracks. And if there's something bigger happening, something beyond just the affair, we need evidence." "Something bigger," Kenneth's voice rose. "What could be bigger than this?" I couldn't tell him everything. Not yet. But I could give him enough. "Rachel has been asking me questions about my finances, my estate, the trust fund her mother left, and the way she asks. I paused. Kenneth, I think she might be planning something. Understanding dawned slowly on his face, followed by something that looked like horror. You think she's waiting for you to... I don't know what she's waiting for, but I need to find out. And to do that, I need time. We both do. Kenneth stood abruptly, paced the small porch. So what am I supposed to do? Just keep living with her, pretending I don't know, watching her lie to me every single day? Yes. The word felt cruel but necessary. For now. Can you do that? He was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. I'm living with a stranger, Walter. Someone who looks like my wife but isn't her anymore. Maybe never was her. I'm sorry, son. Don't. He stopped himself. I'm not your son. I'm just the fool who married your daughter. You're not a fool. And Kenneth, I faced him directly. You're more family to me than you know. We'll get through this. Together. He nodded, but I could see he didn't believe me. I stayed another hour, made him coffee, let him talk through his pain and anger and confusion. Told him about the notebook, about my own suspicions, about Robert Daniels and the estate protection. Gave him something to hold on to beyond just the betrayal. When I finally left around 1 in the morning, Kenneth was still sitting on those porch steps, staring at nothing. I drove home through empty Charleston streets, past darkened storefronts and historic churches, past the life Dorothy and I had built in this city. Back in my workshop, I unlocked the drawer and pulled out the notebook. The pages were filling up faster now. September 7th, 2021. Kenneth discovered Rachel's affair. Tracked her phone to apartment building on Meeting Street. Rachel lied about working late. Kenneth confirmed Brett Sullivan as likely suspect. Advised Kenneth not to confront Need more evidence. Kenneth agreed, but devastated. Quote, I'm living with a stranger. I set down my pen and sat in the silence. The situation was worse than I'd thought. Not just an affair, not just a daughter losing her way. This was calculated, deliberate, and Kenneth was collateral damage in whatever Rachel was planning. I needed more than suspicions now. I needed proof that would stand up in court. And I was going to get it. October brought cooler air and a shift in Rachel's tactics. She knew Kenneth suspected something. I could tell from the way she started managing him carefully, strategically, like a chess player protecting a threatened piece. What I witnessed over the next 3 months was a masterclass in psychological manipulation that would have impressed a con artist. Kenneth called me 2 weeks after the Meeting Street discovery. Walter, I confronted her. His voice was uncertain, lacking the raw pain from our last conversation. About the late nights. About where she's been. My hand tightened on the phone. And she didn't get defensive like I expected. She just looked sad. Said she's been stressed at work, that this new project with the senior management restructuring has been overwhelming. She said she should have communicated better, that she didn't realize how much her schedule was affecting me. Did she mention the apartment on Meeting Street? A pause. See, I didn't bring that up specifically. I just said I knew she wasn't at the office that night. She explained that Brett has been letting her use his apartment to work when the office is too distracting. Said it's quieter there, easier to focus. And you believed her. I don't know what to believe anymore. Kenneth sounded exhausted. She cried Walter, real tears. Said she felt terrible that I'd been worrying. She's been more attentive since then. Making dinner. Asking about my day. Last night we actually talked for 2 hours like we used to. I closed my eyes. Classic manipulation. Give just enough truth mixed with lies. show vulnerability, make the victim question their own instincts. Kenneth, trust your gut. What you saw was real. But what if I'm wrong? What if I'm destroying my marriage over paranoia? That was exactly what Rachel wanted him to think. Over the next weeks, Kenneth's calls followed a pattern. He'd sound confused one day, convinced the next that he'd overreacted. Rachel was playing him perfectly, pulling away, then pulling him close, creating doubt, making him feel guilty for not trusting her. She says I'm being paranoid, Kenneth told me in early November. That I'm looking for problems where there aren't any. And Walter, maybe she's right. Maybe I'm just, you're not paranoid, I said firmly. You saw her car at that apartment. She lied about where she was. Those are facts, not imagination. But I could hear he was already halfway convinced by Rachel's version of reality. I saw it myself during family dinners. Rachel started coming by again in November, always with Kenneth, always on Sunday afternoons after church. She'd arrive with a bright smile and a store-bought pie, playing the dutiful daughter. She'd kiss my cheek, compliment the shop, ask about my week. And to anyone watching, we looked like a normal, happy family. But I was watching more carefully now, listening to what wasn't being said. Every conversation, no matter how it started, eventually circled back to money. She'd mention a colleague who'd just inherited a family home, bring up an article she'd read about estate taxes, comment on a friend whose parents had sold their business for a fortune. Dad, have you thought about retirement? She asked one Sunday in mid-November, sitting at my kitchen table while Kenneth washed dishes. You're 65 now. Most people your age are thinking about slowing down. I like my work. I know you do. But physically it must be getting harder. All that detailed handwork, being on your feet all day. She reached across the table, patted my hand. I just worry about you, especially with your blood pressure. My blood pressure is fine. Is it? When was your last checkup? She pulled out her phone, started tapping. There's a great cardiologist at MUSC, Dr. Richardson. I could make you an appointment. Rachel, I'm fine. She'd looked hurt then, wounded. I'm just trying to take care of you, Dad, the way you took care of me and Mom. From the kitchen, Kenneth had glanced over and I'd seen something in his eyes. He heard it too, the calculation beneath the concern. In early December, Rachel brought up the will. We were in the shop this time. Kenneth was upstairs looking at a collection of vintage train sets. Rachel and I stood by the window watching tourists photograph the Christmas decorations on King Street. Dad, I've been meaning to ask. When's the last time you updated your will? I kept my voice neutral. Why? You're getting older. Things change. It's important to have your affairs in order. She turned to face me. Have you thought about estate planning? Making sure everything's properly organized for when... She stopped, seemed to catch herself. For the future. I've thought about it. Have you talked to a lawyer recently? Because Ken and I met with one last month just to update our own documents. It's surprisingly complicated. Trusts, beneficiaries, tax implications. She trailed off, watching my face. I'd be happy to recommend our attorney, or I could come with you, help you understand the options. I can manage my own affairs, Rachel. Of course you can. I'm not saying you can't. That hurt expression again. I just want to make sure you're protected, that your legacy is preserved the way you'd want it. My legacy. Dorothy's legacy. Rachel was already dividing it up in her mind. After she left that day, I added 3 pages to the notebook. Every word she'd said, every subtle push toward discussing my death, as if it were an inevitable, imminent event. Kenneth called that night. She thinks I'm being too suspicious. She wants us to go to couples counseling. And are you going to counseling? He sighed. I don't know. Maybe it would help. Maybe I am the problem. Kenneth, she's manipulating you. Everything she's doing, the tears, the attention, the accusations of paranoia, it's textbook gaslighting. I know what gaslighting is, Walter. I'm not stupid. His voice sharpened with frustration. But I also know that if I keep this up, keep doubting her, keep tracking her phone and suspecting every late night at work, I'm going to lose her anyway. Maybe I already have. The defeat in his voice was heartbreaking. By Christmas, the situation had calcified into an uneasy routine. Kenneth had stopped calling as often. Rachel continued her performance of the perfect daughter and improving wife. And I kept filling the notebook with observations that painted a clear picture, but not yet a complete one. Christmas night, after Rachel and Kenneth had left, I sat alone in my workshop. The shop was closed for the holiday. Outside King Street was quiet, except for the occasional car passing and the distant sound of church bells from St. Philip's. I opened the notebook to a fresh page and wrote the date, December 25th, 2021. Then I wrote, Rachel is counting the days until I die. She's asked about my will 3 times in the past month. She's mentioned my health, my age, my blood pressure. She's positioned herself as the concerned daughter while simultaneously manipulating Kenneth into doubting his own reality. She's having an affair with Brett Sullivan, I'm certain now, but that's not the end game. The end game is my estate. Everything Dorothy and I built. She's waiting. And I'm running out of time to stop her. I closed the notebook and sat in the silence. I needed more than observations now. I needed proof of intent, proof of conspiracy, proof that would hold up not just in court, but in the court of public opinion when this all came to light. I needed to catch Rachel in the act of planning my downfall, and I was going to do exactly that. January 2023 brought a cold snap that made Charleston forget it was supposed to be mild. Tourists flooded King Street anyway. The azaleas prepared to bloom. And I decided to pay my daughter a surprise visit at work. I'd never been to Palmetto Consulting Group before. Rachel had always kept her professional life separate, citing company policies about visitors. But I'd looked up the address, a modern glass building on East Bay Street overlooking the harbor, and on a Wednesday afternoon, I drove downtown with a bag from Brown Dog Deli. Lunch delivery for my daughter, I told the receptionist, holding up the bag. Rachel Hayes, HR department. The young woman smiled. 4th floor. Take the elevator to your right. The 4th floor was all sleek lines and open concept workspace. Glass-walled conference rooms, ergonomic chairs, motivational posters about synergy and innovation. I asked someone where I could find Rachel, and they pointed toward a hallway lined with smaller offices. That's when I heard her voice. She was in a conference room at the end of the hall. The door was cracked open about 6 inches, not closed, but not quite open either. Through the gap, I could see Rachel sitting at a table, and across from her, leaning back in his chair with that practiced, casual confidence, was Brett Sullivan. I should have announced myself. Should have knocked, walked in, handed over the sandwiches like the concerned father I was pretending to be. Instead, I stopped just outside the door and listened. Seriously, though, how much longer are we talking? Brett's voice carried that impatient edge of youth, of someone who'd never had to wait for anything he wanted. I don't know. Rachel sounded frustrated. He's 63, but he's healthy, stubborn as hell, probably going to live to 90 just to spite me. Brett laughed. So when the old man passes, you inherit everything. There was a pause. Then Rachel's voice, cooler, now more calculated. The house, the shop, the trust fund Mom left. Easily $4.5 million, maybe more depending on property valuations. My hand tightened on the paper bag. The sandwich container crinkled. And Kenneth, Brett asked. He'll sign whatever I want in the divorce. Rachel's tone was dismissive. Once I have the money, we're free. We can go anywhere. Do anything. You've always wanted to live in California, right? We could buy a place in San Diego. Start over. How long do we have to wait? Not long. Dad's 63. He has high blood pressure, not terrible, but it's there. And he works too hard, spends all day hunched over that workbench in a basement with poor ventilation. She paused. Things happen to men his age. Heart attacks, strokes, accidents. The way she said accidents made my blood run cold. Brett whistled low. Jesus, Rachel, that's dark. I'm being realistic, I'm not. She stopped abruptly. Did you hear something? I moved quickly, silently back down the hallway, found an empty cubicle and ducked behind the partition. My heart was hammering so hard I thought they'd hear it from the conference room. After a moment, I heard footsteps. Rachel appeared in the hallway, looked both ways. I held my breath, pressed against the cubicle wall. Nothing, she called back. Probably just someone walking by. I waited until I heard the conference room door close completely. Then I walked to the elevator on legs that felt like they might give out. The receptionist smiled as I passed. I managed to smile back somehow. I left the sandwich bag in a trash can on the street. The drive back to the shop took 15 minutes. I don't remember any of it. I just remember pulling into the alley behind Hayes's toy restoration, killing the engine, and sitting there with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. My daughter, my only child. The baby Dorothy and I had raised the little girl who used to sit on my lap while I carved wooden dolls, was waiting for me to die. Not just passively waiting, actively calculating. Planning her life around my death like it was an inevitable appointment she was tired of waiting for. $4.5 million. That's what I was worth to her. Not as a father. Not as the man who'd raised her alone after Dorothy died. Just a dollar amount. An obstacle between her and the life she wanted with Brett Sullivan. Inside the shop, Anna took one look at my face and asked if I was okay. I'm fine, I lied. Just need to make a phone call. I went down to my workshop, closed the door, and called Robert Daniels. Walter. Robert's voice was concerned. What's wrong? I need to see you. Today, if possible. I have a slot at 4:30. Can you make it to my office? I'll be there. I hung up and sat in the silence of my basement workshop, surrounded by broken toys waiting to be fixed. The irony wasn't lost on me. At 4:30, I was sitting across from Robert in his office on Broad Street. The same office where Dorothy had set up Rachel's trust fund 17 years ago. The same desk where we'd signed our wills believing we were protecting our daughter's future. I need to protect my estate from my daughter, I said without preamble. And I need to do it without her knowing. Robert set down his pen carefully. Tell me everything. So I did. I told him about the past 18 months, about Kenneth's suspicions, about Rachel's questions regarding my health and finances, about Brett Sullivan and the apartment on Meeting Street, about the gaslighting and manipulation. And then I told him what I'd heard today. Every word. Every cold, calculated sentence about my death being a matter of inconvenient timing. Robert listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Walter, he said finally, what you're describing is more than just an affair or financial opportunism. If Rachel is actively discussing your death as a path to inheritance, we need to take serious protective measures, and we may need to involve law enforcement. Not yet, I said. I need more proof, something concrete. A recording documents evidence of actual planning. That could take time. I have time. According to my daughter, I'm good for another few decades if I'm stubborn enough. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. Robert pulled out a legal pad. Then let's start building your protection. And Walter, from now on, you document everything. Every conversation, every interaction, every warning sign. I already am, I said, thinking of the notebook locked in my workshop drawer. Good, because when this comes to light, and it will, you're going to need every piece of evidence you can get. I left Robert's office as the sun was setting over Charleston Harbor. The tourists were out in force, taking pictures of the historic buildings, eating ice cream, enjoying the beautiful winter evening. And I was planning how to protect myself from my own child. After that January afternoon at Palmetto Consulting, I couldn't sleep for 3 days. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Rachel's voice. 4.5 million. Things happen to men his age. Accidents. Robert Daniels and I met again in early February. The new will is drafted, he said. But Walter, where are you going to keep all this? If Rachel searches, she will, I interrupted. Once she realizes I'm changing things, then you need somewhere she'd never think to look. I thought about my workshop, about the toys I'd been restoring, about Dorothy's words. You fix broken things, Walter. I know exactly where to hide them. Back at the shop, I stood in my basement looking at 4 pieces waiting for restoration. A train set, a wooden doll, a roly-poly, a music box. Rachel had walked past these shelves dozens of times, dismissed them as inventory. She had no idea that broken toys could hold secrets. I started with the train set, the Lionel collection from 1947, worth a fortune to collectors. The coal car's cargo hold was perfect, designed to carry decorative pellets. I removed every pellet, placed Robert's documents inside copies of my new will trust modifications legal memos, everything sealed in waterproof plastic. I replaced the coal pellets on top, arranged naturally. Unless someone removed the entire load, they'd never find it. The wooden doll came next. German 1890s with a hollow torso accessed through a magnetic back panel. Inside, I placed Kenneth's evidence photos of the Meeting Street apartment, Rachel's car parked outside when she'd claimed to be working late. Screenshots proving her lies. Kenneth's timeline of discovering the affair. I closed the panel, tested the catch. The doll looked innocent. Then came the roly-poly doll, and this one hurt. Dorothy had bought it for Rachel's first birthday. A Russian toy that always returned upright. Rachel had thrown it away 2 years ago during decluttering. I'd rescued it, repaired it. The base unscrewed. Inside the hollow core, I placed Dorothy's original handwritten will. If my daughter shows herself to be motivated by greed rather than love, Walter is to distribute the estate as he sees fit, prioritizing those who honored our family's values. I also included my calculations, estate total $4.5 million, the exact figure Rachel had quoted to Brett. I set the doll on my workshop shelf at eye level. If Rachel came looking, she'd walk right past it. Too worthless. Finally, Dorothy's music box. French 1890s hand-painted porcelain lid. Dorothy had given it to me 3 days before she died. I'd kept it for 17 years, too precious to sell, until I discovered its secret. The wooden base had always seemed too thick. I'd found a 1/4-inch discrepancy, hidden compartment. The mechanism press, the third carved rose from the left, while turning the key counterclockwise. The panel would slide open. Inside, I placed the digital recorder containing audio from January, Rachel's voice discussing my death with Brett. Not long. Dad's 64. He has high blood pressure. I also placed a letter. To Kenneth. To the authorities. A father's testimony about the daughter who'd betrayed him. I sealed everything closed. The compartment returned the music box to its shelf. By late February, it was done. 4 toys, 4 vaults, 4 pieces of evidence. Then, in early March, Anna called me. "Walter, Rachel's here. She said she needed old tax documents, but I found her in your workshop going through drawers." My blood went cold. "I'm on my way." When I arrived, Rachel was upstairs examining a porcelain doll, all innocence. "Dad, I was looking for those tax forms, for Kenneth's accountant." I never mentioned any tax forms. Her smile faltered. "Oh, must have misheard. Anyway, this place is beautiful." After she left, Anna pulled me aside. She was down there 10 minutes. I heard drawers. I went to my workshop. Everything looked normal, but I'd worked here 40 years. I noticed things. Filing cabinet ajar. Papers repositioned. My security camera installed last month would show everything. That evening, I watched the footage. Rachel had been methodical. Every drawer, every file behind picture frames. And 3 times she'd glanced at the toys on my shelves, the train, the dolls, the music box. Each time she'd looked away. Not worth her attention. Over the next 2 months, she came back twice more. Once, looking for old photos. Once when she thought I'd be at a doctor's appointment. Each time Anna alerted me. Each time the camera showed Rachel searching systematically. And each time she walked past the roly-poly doll without a second glance. Past the train set. Past the wooden doll. Past the music box. In May, I caught her red-handed. Came home early to find her in my apartment above the shop, going through the bookshelf where Dorothy used to keep documents. "Dad, you scared me," she laughed nervously. "Just looking for Mom's old photo albums." "In my bedroom closet." She left quickly after that. Anna found me that evening in my workshop surrounded by the 4 toys. "She's looking for something," Anna said quietly. "I know." "Your will?" "Yes. And she's not going to find it." I looked at the train, the dolls, the music box. "No. Because it's right in front of her eyes, and she's too blind to see it." Anna studied the toys. "These aren't just antiques anymore, are they?" "No," I said. "They're weapons." After Anna left, I sat alone in the silence. My daughter had searched my shop, my home, my workspace, had opened every drawer, checked every file, looked behind every frame. She'd held the wooden doll in her hands during one visit. "This is pretty, Dad. Worth much." Set it down without another thought. She'd walked past the roly-poly doll, the toy she'd once loved, then discarded at least a dozen times. Never suspected. She'd even asked about the music box once. "Mom's old box. Does it still play?" I'd wound it up, let La Vie en Rose fill the room. She'd smiled, said it was beautiful, walked away. The evidence she was desperately searching for had been within arm's reach the entire time, hidden in plain sight, in the toys she'd deemed worthless, in the memories she'd thrown away. And when the time came, they would speak louder than any words I could say. 3 years, over 1,000 days of watching my daughter plot against me. Let me tell you what patience looks like when you're documenting your own child's betrayal. It started that September night when Kenneth called from his porch steps, broken and confused. The Meeting Street apartment. The lies. The beginning of the end. Within weeks, Rachel had shifted tactics, gaslighting him with surgical precision, convincing him he was paranoid, that his suspicions were destroying their relationship. I watched her pull him close when he got too distant, push him away when he got too comfortable, keeping him off balance, keeping him controlled. That fall, I filled the first 50 pages of my notebook. Every conversation, every lie. Kenneth's pain, documented in his own words during our late-night phone calls. Rachel's questions about my blood pressure, my doctor's visits, my life insurance beneficiaries. I started seeing Robert Daniels monthly building the legal framework to protect everything Dorothy and I had created. January 2023 brought the conversation I'd been dreading. $4.5 million. My death discussed like a business transaction. That was the day I stopped hoping and started planning in earnest. Brett's impatient questions about timing. I drove home shaking that day, finally accepting I'd been right to be afraid. The next few months, I worked in my basement until dawn. The train set, the wooden doll, the roly-poly Rachel had thrown away, Dorothy's music box. 4 toys became 4 vaults, each one hiding evidence my daughter could never imagine existed. Summer of 2023 brought Rachel's promotion, senior HR manager, $50,000 raise. She posted photos from Husk, the happy, successful couple toasting champagne. 2 weeks later, Kenneth called at midnight. "She's still seeing him, Walter. Nothing's changed." By fall, Brett got promoted too. Rachel had used her new position to advance her lover's career, the audacity of it breathtaking in its cruelty. They grew bolder. Weekend trips to Asheville, Rachel claimed, were team retreats. Kenneth found hotel receipts, rooms under Brett's name, 2 guests. A week in Savannah for a conference that never existed. Kenneth stopped calling as often after Thanksgiving. Resignation had replaced pain. He was making peace with the end, waiting like I was for the right moment. I filled another 100 pages. The new year, 2024, brought Kenneth's desperate attempt to save what was already dead. Couples counseling with Dr. Laura Morrison. Rachel performed brilliantly, crying about work pressure, talking about reconnection, blaming everything on stress. The therapist believed her suggested date nights and communication exercises. Kenneth tried everything. Romantic dinners at Charleston's finest restaurants, birthday jewelry, handwritten letters about their relationship. He fought for a marriage Rachel had abandoned long ago. By spring of 2024, Rachel's questions about my health intensified. When was my next physical? Had I checked my heart, updated my life insurance? The hours I spent in the basement with chemicals and dust, surely that couldn't be good for my lungs. She was planting seeds, creating a narrative where my eventual death would seem expected, natural, almost anticipated. Anna started making notes without me asking. Ms. Jennifer Hudson, who'd been my customer for 20 years, did the same. They'd watched Rachel grow up. They saw what she'd become. And they quietly documented every troubling conversation, every calculated question. By summer of 2024, Kenneth quit therapy. What's the point? I'm paying someone to watch my wife lie for an hour a week. In November, we met at my shop on a rainy Tuesday evening. He sat in my workshop, coffee growing cold in his hands. "I'm done, Walter. I can't save this." His eyes were hollow. "When you're ready to do whatever you're planning, and I know you're planning something, I'll help. However you need." That night, Kenneth stopped being just my son-in-law. He became my ally, the son I'd never had. Winter turned to 2025 and the atmosphere shifted. Rachel and Brett were losing patience. Rachel's visits increased, her questions becoming more direct. She asked outright about life insurance updates. "With property values now, you're probably underinsured. What if something happened?" "Nothing's going to happen." "But if it did," she softened her voice. "I just want everything you and Mom built to be secure." Secure. Her code word for controlled. Ms. Hudson pulled me aside one afternoon in early 2025. "Walter, I've known you since Dorothy was alive. Your daughter talks about you like she's planning a funeral. It makes my skin crawl." She wasn't wrong. As 2025 progressed, the tension increased. Rachel's questions became more frequent. Brett's impatience showed in the few times I saw them together at public events, always maintaining the pretense of professionalism. But their body language told a different story. Kenneth moved out in the fall of 2025. No dramatic confrontation. He simply packed his things one day while Rachel was at work and left. He called me from his new apartment downtown. "I can't do it anymore, Walter. I can't sleep in the same bed with someone who wishes you dead." By then my notebook had grown to over 300 pages. 3 years of documentation, dates, times, conversations, witnesses. Kenneth's photos of the Meeting Street apartment, audio recordings from Palmetto Consulting, legal documents hidden inside toys that sat on my workshop shelves, looking like nothing more than innocent antiques waiting for restoration. Winter approached again, January 2026, and I knew the time had come. Robert Daniels and I met one final time in early January. He looked across his desk at me with the weight of what we'd built together. "Are you ready?" I thought about Dorothy, about the music box she'd left me with its hidden compartment, about 17 years of missing her and 30 years before that of building a life together, about Rachel, the daughter we'd loved and somehow lost along the way. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." 3 years, over 1,000 days of watching my daughter plot against me, of documenting her betrayal, of hiding evidence in the toys Dorothy and I had once restored with love and care. And finally, I knew it was time to act. Edward Harrison showed up on a gray January morning, just a week before the dinner, without calling first. I was upstairs repairing a jack-in-the-box when I heard the bell. Anna was at the counter helping a tourist, but I recognized Edward's voice immediately, that deep Carolina drawl that hadn't changed since we were 17 years old, sitting in the back row of James Island High School, planning futures we thought we understood. "Walter in?" he asked Anna. "Workshop," she said. "You know the way." I heard his footsteps on the stairs, slower than they used to be, heavier. Edward was 68 now, 2 years older than me. We'd been friends for 35 years. He'd been at my wedding to Dorothy, stood beside me at her funeral, helped me move inventory when I'd first opened this shop. We'd weathered hurricanes together, both literal and metaphorical. But when he appeared in my workshop doorway, his face told me this wasn't a social call. "Edward." I set down my tools. "What's wrong?" He closed the door behind him. Unusual. Edward was never one for privacy. "Walter, I need to tell you something about Rachel." My chest tightened, but I kept my expression neutral. "Go on." He pulled out a chair, sat heavily. "I was having lunch yesterday at slightly north of Broad. You know that place on East Bay with the courtyard?" I nodded. "I was with a client. We'd just finished, I was heading out, and I saw her." He paused, rubbing his face with both hands. "Rachel. With some young guy. Mid-20s, good-looking, dressed expensive. They were at a corner table, thought they had privacy." I waited. "Walter, they weren't acting like colleagues. They were—" Edward struggled with the words. She was leaning into him. He had his hand on her knee under the table, and they were talking. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard enough. "What did you hear?" "The guy, I assume this is the Brett you mentioned. He said something about timing, about waiting," and Rachel laughed. "Said, once we get the money, we can go anywhere. Do anything." Edward looked at me with genuine distress. Then this Brett character said, and I'm quoting, "Once the old man is gone, we're set for life." The workshop was silent except for the distant sound of Anna helping customers upstairs. I wanted to walk over there. Edward continued, his voice hardening. Wanted to grab that punk by his collar and... He stopped himself. But I didn't. I took a photo instead. From a distance, but clear enough. He pulled out his phone, showed me the screen. There they were, Rachel and Brett sitting close, her hand covering his on the table. The image was slightly blurry, but unmistakable. "I'm sorry, Walter. I know she's your daughter. But you needed to know." I looked at my oldest friend, at the concern and anger warring in his expression, at the way his hands shook slightly as he held the phone. "I already know, Edward." He blinked. "Oh, what?" "I've known for 3 years." His mouth opened, closed. 3 years? His voice rose. "Walter, what the hell? Why haven't you done anything?" "I have been doing something." I stood, unlocked the bottom drawer of my workbench, pulled out the notebook. 300 pages now. I set it on the table between us. "I've been documenting, gathering evidence, building a case." Edward stared at the notebook like it was a bomb. "A case, Walter, what are you talking about?" So I told him. Not everything. I didn't mention the toys, the hidden compartments, Dorothy's music box, but enough. The affair, the overheard conversation about my death, Rachel's calculations about the estate, Kenneth's pain, the legal protections Robert Daniels and I had put in place. Edward listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "Jesus Christ, Walter." He shook his head slowly. "Your own daughter." "Yes." "And you've just been watching, waiting for 3 years?" "Patience is a virtue I learned from restoring toys," I said. "You don't force repairs. You wait for the right moment. You gather your materials. You make sure you understand the full extent of the damage before you try to fix it." "But Walter," Edward leaned forward, "this isn't a broken toy. This is your child plotting your death for money." "I'm aware." He studied my face. "You're not surprised. You're not even angry. You're just calm. I was angry 3 years ago. Now I'm just prepared." Edward stood, paced the small workshop. "Dorothy knew, didn't she, before she died? She saw this coming." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "She tried to warn me. I didn't understand at the time. But yes, Dorothy knew that Rachel would need guidance, that she might lose her way. And she prepared for this." Edward stopped pacing, looked at me intently. "The trust fund, the protections, whatever else she left you, Dorothy was always 3 steps ahead of everyone." She was. "So what are you going to do now?" "You can't just keep documenting forever. At some point you have to act." I thought about the music box upstairs, about the toys hiding evidence that would destroy Rachel's carefully constructed lies, about Robert Daniels's final question. "Are you ready? I'm going to give Rachel one last chance," I said. "An opportunity to come clean, to tell the truth, to choose differently. And if she doesn't," I met Edward's eyes, "then I'll show her what happens when you betray family, when you wait for someone to die so you can steal what they built, when you manipulate good people like Kenneth and turn love into a transaction." Edward whistled low. "You've really thought this through." 3 years, Edward. I've had plenty of time to think." He picked up his phone, looked at the photo again. "Do you want me to send this to you for your evidence?" "Please." He tapped the screen. My phone buzzed in my pocket. "Walter," he said quietly, "are you sure about this? Once you do whatever you're planning, there's no going back. She's still your daughter." She stopped being my daughter the day she started wishing for my death. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. Now she's just someone who shares my last name and wants my money. Edward gripped my shoulder. "If you need anything at all, you call me." "Understood." "Understood." After he left, I sat alone in my workshop. The notebook lay open on my workbench. Edward's photo was on my phone. Above me, Anna's footsteps moved across the shop floor, helping customers, preserving normalcy. I pulled out my phone and called Robert Daniels. "It's time," I said when he answered. "Set it up." "The dinner." "Yes, I want it at the Harbor Club. Private dining room, January 15th. I'll make the arrangements." A pause. "Walter, are you absolutely certain?" I looked at the toys on my shelves, at Dorothy's music box with its hidden secrets. At the 3 years of my life I'd spent documenting my daughter's betrayal. I've never been more certain of anything. I made the call on a Tuesday afternoon in early January. Rachel answered on the third ring, slightly breathless. "Dad, is everything okay?" "Everything's fine. I wanted to ask you something." I kept my voice casual, warm even. "I'd like to have a family dinner. You, Kenneth, and me. At the Harbor Club. January 15th, 7 o'clock. A pause. I could almost hear her mind working. "The Harbor Club, that's pretty fancy. What's the occasion?" "I want to talk about the future, about estate planning. I think it's time we had that conversation." The change in her voice was immediate, bright, eager. Oh, Dad, yes, absolutely. I think that's a great idea. We should definitely discuss that." "Good. I'll make the reservation. Private dining room overlooking the river." "Private room. Perfect." She was trying to contain her excitement and failing. "Should I bring anything, any documents you want me to look at?" "Just yourself. And Kenneth, of course." After I hung up, I sat with the phone in my hand for a long moment. My daughter had just agreed to attend her own reckoning, thinking it was a payday. Kenneth called me that evening. "Walter, Rachel told me about the dinner." His voice was cautious. "What are you planning?" "Trust me, son. Everything will be clear soon. She's been on the phone all afternoon. Called her lawyer friend, asked about estate planning procedures. She thinks," he stopped. "I know what she thinks. Should I come to this dinner? I need you there, Kenneth, as a witness, as family." I paused. "You're still family to me even if the marriage is ending." I heard him exhale slowly. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to give her a chance to tell the truth. One last chance. And if she doesn't, then the truth tells itself." The next morning, I met with Robert Daniels one final time. We sat in his office on Broad Street reviewing every document we'd prepared over the past 3 years. The new will, the trust modifications, the conditional inheritance clauses, letters to be delivered to various parties depending on how things unfolded. "Everything's in order," Robert said, closing the last folder. "If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong. Walter, you're about to publicly expose your daughter's conspiracy. She could react unpredictably, violently even. Which is why I've arranged for Detective Charles Bennett to be there." I'd called Charles 2 days earlier. Old friend, good man. He'd worked with the Charleston Police Department for 25 years before retiring. Now he did private security consulting. He'll be dining in the main restaurant, close enough to intervene if needed. Robert nodded slowly. "You've thought of everything." "I've had 3 years to think." That afternoon, I went to the Harbor Club and confirmed the reservation. Private dining room on the second floor, windows overlooking the Cooper River. Table for 3. I walked through the space, checked the acoustics, the exits, the sight lines. The maitre d' probably thought I was paranoid. I didn't care. The days leading up to the 15th crawled by. Rachel called twice. Once to ask what she should wear. Once to confirm the time. Both calls ended with her asking variations of the same question. "You're feeling okay, right, Dad? No health concerns? You seem tired lately. Planting seeds even now." creating a narrative of declining health in case she needed it later. Kenneth called once, late at night. "Rachel keeps asking me about the dinner. What you might say. What I think you're planning." A pause. "I haven't told her anything." "Thank you. Walter, whatever happens tomorrow night, I want you to know you've been more of a father to me than my own ever was, and I'm grateful." My throat tightened. "Get some rest, son. Tomorrow's going to be a long night." The evening of January 14th, I sat alone in my workshop. The shop was closed. Anna had gone home hours ago. Outside, Charleston was settling into its evening rhythm. Tourists on King Street, church bells from St. Philip's, the distant sound of horse-drawn carriages on the cobblestones. I'd laid everything out on my workbench like surgical instruments. The notebook, 300 pages, documenting 3 years of betrayal. The legal documents Robert had prepared. Edward's photo from the restaurant. Kenneth's pictures of the Meeting Street apartment. And Dorothy's music box. I picked it up, carefully ran my fingers over the hand-painted porcelain lid. The couple dancing under cherry blossoms. The intricate wooden base with its hidden compartment. I wound the key, listened to La Vie en Rose play through once. On my workbench sat a framed photo of Dorothy, taken a year before she died. She was in the workshop, holding a newly restored doll, smiling at the camera. Smiling at me. I spoke to her like I had 1,000 times since she'd been gone. "I hope I'm doing the right thing, love. I hope this is what you meant when you left me that music box. When you said I'd know when the time came." I set the music box down gently. "Tomorrow our daughter is going to learn what we taught her when she was young, but somewhere forgot that family means more than money. That love isn't something you put a price tag on. That actions have consequences." I sat in the silence for a long time. Then I carefully wrapped the music box in cloth, placed it in a small leather bag I'd bought for this purpose. Tomorrow. Everything would come together tomorrow. I locked up the shop, climbed the stairs to my small apartment above. Set out my clothes for the next day, the charcoal suit Dorothy had bought me for our 30th anniversary. A white shirt pressed, a navy tie. I didn't sleep much that night. January 15th arrived with clear skies and temperatures in the mid-60s. Perfect Charleston winter weather. I dressed carefully, checked my appearance in the mirror. A 66-year-old man in a suit holding a leather bag. I looked like someone going to a business dinner. I felt like someone going to war. At 6:30, I locked the shop and walked to my truck. Placed the bag carefully on the passenger seat. Drove through downtown Charleston, past the historic homes and ancient churches, past tourists taking sunset photos, past couples holding hands on street corners. I parked at the Harbor Club at 6:50. Sat in the truck for a moment, gathering myself. Then I picked up the bag, stepped out, and walked toward the restaurant entrance. Tonight, my daughter would learn that some betrayals come with a price, and I was going to make her pay it in full. If you're still following along, please leave a comment with the number 1, so I know you're here with me. Please note that this story contains some fictional elements created for educational and entertainment purposes. If you prefer not to continue, you may stop here. The private dining room at the Harbor Club was perfect. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Cooper River, where evening light turned the water silver and gold. White tablecloth, 3-place settings, candles flickering in crystal holders. Rachel was already there, radiant in a navy dress I'd never seen before. Designer, expensive, her hair-styled makeup flawless. She looked like someone celebrating good news. Kenneth sat beside her, silent and tense in a suit that looked too tight. When I entered, our eyes met briefly. I gave him a small nod. "Trust me. It's almost over." "Dad." Rachel stood, kissed my cheek. Her perfume was overwhelming. "This place is gorgeous." Only the best for family, I said, setting my leather bag carefully on an empty chair. We sat. Rachel ordered expensive Chardonnay. We're celebrating, right? Kenneth said nothing. The first course came. Rachel made small talk, work gossip, a colleague's wedding, a new restaurant downtown, surface-level conversation, while she waited for what she really wanted to hear. I let her talk. Let her build anticipation. Halfway through the main course, she couldn't wait anymore. So, Dad, she set down her fork. You mentioned estate planning. I did. And you've made decisions. Her voice was carefully casual, but her eyes were hungry. Yes, several important decisions about my will, she smiled. I'm so glad. It's important at your age to make sure everything's in order. At your age. As if 66 was 1 foot in the grave. But before we discuss that, I said, reaching for my bag, I want to give you something, a gift from your mother. Rachel's expression faltered. A gift. I pulled out the music box, unwrapped it from its cloth, set it on the table. The candlelight caught the hand-painted porcelain lid, the couple dancing under cherry blossoms. Mom's music box. Her voice went uncertain. Why now? Open it. There's something inside your mother wanted you to hear. Dad, I don't understand. Open it, Rachel. Her hands trembled as she lifted the lid. The mechanism engaged and La Vie en Rose began to play. The melody filled the room, that haunting, beautiful song Dorothy used to hum while working. Rachel stared at the box, confused. Then 30 seconds into the song, another sound emerged. Dorothy's voice. Rachel, my darling daughter. If you're hearing this, it means you've lost your way. Rachel's head snapped up, eyes wide. Your father is a good man. Dorothy's recorded voice continued, steady and clear. He fixes broken things, toys, relationships, trust, families. But even he cannot fix greed, my love. Even he cannot repair a heart that values money over people. Tears started running down Rachel's face. Dad, what is this? Listen, I said coldly. Remember what I taught you. That family is worth more than any fortune. That love is the only inheritance that matters. I hope, Dorothy's voice broke slightly. I hope you remember Rachel. I hope you choose love. The recording ended. For a moment, there was only the music box melody. Then another voice started. Male, young, impatient. Brett Sullivan. So when the old man passes, you inherit everything. Rachel went white. The house, the shop, the trust fund Mom left. Her own voice now clear and calculating. Easily $4.5 million, maybe more. And Kenneth, he'll sign whatever I want in the divorce. Once I have the money, we're free. How long do we have to wait? Not long. Dad's 64. He has high blood pressure. Things happen to men his age. Kenneth stood so abruptly his chair fell backward. His face had gone from pale to red, hands clenched. He stared at Rachel like she was a stranger. Then without a word, he walked out. Kenneth. Rachel half rose, but I spoke. Let him go. She turned to me, mascara running, hands shaking. Dad, I can explain. That conversation, we weren't serious. Stop. My voice was ice. I heard that conversation in January 2023. 3 years ago, Rachel. I stood outside that conference room and listened to you discuss my death like it was a business delay. No, Dad, please. I understand perfectly. I reached into my bag, pulled out a USB drive, set it on the table. 3 years of documentation. Every lie you told Kenneth. Every question about my health, my estate, my life insurance, audio recordings, photos of you and Brett, witness statements. Rachel stared at the USB like it was a weapon. You spent 3 years waiting for me to die, I continued. Gaslighted your husband, manipulated everyone around you, and you thought I wouldn't notice. Dad, I love you, I would never. Don't insult me with lies, not now. The door opened. Detective Charles Bennett walked in plain clothes but unmistakably law enforcement. Walter. He nodded at me, then looked at Rachel. Ms. Hayes. I handed him the USB drive. Everything you need. 3 years of conspiracy. Audio evidence of intent. Witness testimony. Charles pocketed the drive. I'll need to ask you some questions, Ms. Hayes. Rachel looked between us, finally understanding. You planned all of this? The dinner, the recording, this was a setup. This was justice, I said. Your mother left me that music box 17 years ago and told me it would help when the time came. She knew, Rachel. She knew you'd lose your way, and she gave me the tool to protect our family from you. I'm your family. You stopped being my family the day you started wishing for my death. The words hung in the air like a verdict. Rachel collapsed into her chair, sobbing, not manipulative tears, real tears. The tears of someone whose plans had just imploded. I picked up the music box, silenced it, wrapped it back in cloth, placed it in my bag. Detective Bennett will need you at the station, I said flatly. You'll want to call a lawyer. Dad, please. She reached for my hand. I pulled away. Goodbye, Rachel. I walked out, leaving my daughter sobbing at a table set for 3. Downstairs, Kenneth was at the bar, staring at untouched whiskey. I sat beside him. It's over, I said quietly. He nodded. Does this ever really end? The betrayal ended tonight. What comes after? That's up to all of us. Kenneth turned to me, eyes red but dry. Thank you for loving me enough to tell the truth. You are my family, I told him. Rachel made her choices. You just got caught in the crossfire. I left Kenneth and walked outside. The Cooper River stretched before me, reflecting Charleston's lights. Tourists walked past, laughing. Life continuing oblivious. I stood holding my leather bag with Dorothy's music box inside, feeling hollow. Not triumphant, not vindicated, just empty. It was done. The toys had spoken. The truth had been revealed, and my daughter's betrayal was now a matter of public record. But winning felt a lot like losing when the war was against your own child. The morning of January 16th arrived with rain. I woke at dawn, listened to water drumming against the windows, and didn't move. Somewhere in Charleston, my daughter was waking up to the wreckage of her own making. My phone had been buzzing since midnight. 37 missed calls, all from Rachel. I turned it face down and made coffee. At 7:15, Robert Daniels called. Walter, it's everywhere. Local news picked it up. Prominent HR manager accused of conspiracy. Detective Bennett released a statement. Palmetto's already scrambling. I said nothing. Walter, are you all right? I just destroyed my daughter's life. On purpose. How exactly am I supposed to feel? Robert's voice softened. Like someone who had no other choice. That doesn't make it hurt less. I went downstairs to open the shop. Force of habit. But when I reached the door, I just stood there with the key in my hand. I couldn't do it. Couldn't smile at customers. Couldn't pretend everything was normal. I locked the door from inside. Flipped the sign to closed. Anna called at 8. Walter, I just saw the news. Is this about Rachel? Yes. Oh my God. Do you need me to come in? The shop's closed today, maybe tomorrow too. Of course. Whatever you need. A pause. Walter, you did the right thing. Dorothy would be proud. I wasn't sure about that. At 9, Kenneth called from the police station. It's a circus here, press everywhere. Detective Bennett's been fielding calls all morning. He sounded exhausted. Walter, they told me about Brett. He's gone. Gone. Cleaned out the apartment, maxed out a credit card in Rachel's name, $15,000, and disappeared. Probably halfway to California by now. Of course. Brett Sullivan had never been in it for love. Just money. And when the money vanished, so did he. Rachel's been calling me too, Kenneth continued. 20, 30 times. Begging for help. I blocked her number. Good. Do you regret it? His voice went quiet. What you did last night. I thought about Dorothy. About 3 years of documentation. About Rachel's face when she heard her own voice plotting my death. No, I said finally. I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret doing it. Yeah, me neither. At 10:30, Edward showed up. He took one look at me and pulled me into a hug. We stood there in the entrance while rain hammered the streets outside. I saw the news, Edward said. Christ, Walter, are you okay? Everyone keeps asking me that. Because you look like hell. We went down to my workshop. Edward made coffee while I sat at my workbench surrounded by the toys that had held my secrets. Palmetto fired her, Edward said. Effective immediately. Ethics violation. They're auditing everything. Turns out she used company funds to help Brett secure that apartment. I took a sip of coffee. It tasted like ash. And the police. Bennett's building a case. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Possible attempted elder abuse. The DA's reviewing everything. Edward sat across from me. This is going to get worse before it gets better. There'll be a trial. Media coverage. Rachel's lawyers will try to paint you as the villain. I know. At noon, my phone rang again. Rachel, the 38th call. This time I answered. Dad. Her voice was wrecked, desperate. Dad, please, I need to explain. There's nothing to explain. Yes, there is. That recording was taken out of context. We weren't serious. I stood outside that conference room for 10 minutes. I heard every word. You discussed my death like it was a business transaction. Dad, I was venting. You don't understand the pressure. Where's Brett? Rachel, silence. Where's Brett? I don't know. Her voice broke. He's gone. He took everything. The money, the credit cards. He left me. Like you left Kenneth. Like you were planning to leave me in a grave so you could cash out. That's not fair. You spent 3 years wishing I was dead. You gaslighted your husband. You manipulated everyone who loved you. You chose money over family. And now the money's gone, and so is everyone else. Dad, please. You made your choice, Rachel. Now you live with it. I hung up. Edward was watching me. You okay? No, but I will be. That afternoon I sat alone in my workshop. Rain still falling. The shop dark and quiet. I pulled out Dorothy's music box, wound the key, let La Vie en Rose play through once. Did I do the right thing? I asked the empty room, asked Dorothy, asked God. The music played, the rain fell, and I sat in the silence I'd been preparing for over 3 years. Victory tasted like ashes and rain, but it was victory nonetheless. Kenneth came to the shop on a gray Tuesday afternoon, exactly 1 week after the dinner. I was in my workshop when Anna called down. Walter Kenneth's here. He stood by the front window looking out at King Street. He'd gotten a haircut. The hollow exhaustion that had defined him for years was gone, replaced by something like peace. Kenneth. I crossed the room. You look well. I feel well. For the first time in a long time. He glanced at Anna. Can we talk? We went to my workshop. I poured coffee. We sat surrounded by toys that had witnessed more family drama than most therapists. I filed the divorce papers this morning, Kenneth said. Adultery. Fraud. My lawyer says it'll be uncontested. Rachel's attorney advised her not to fight. How do you feel? Relieved. He wrapped his hands around the mug. I spent 4 years married to someone who was waiting for you to die. If you hadn't documented everything gathered evidence for 3 years, Walter, she would have destroyed me. You saved my life. I saved us both. He set down the mug. That's why I came to say goodbye. The word hit harder than I'd expected. Goodbye. I got a job offer. Atlanta, civil engineering firm. I'm leaving next week. He smiled sadly. Charleston has too many ghosts. Every corner reminds me of her, of the life I thought we had. I understood completely. You deserve a fresh start, I said. So do you. Kenneth leaned forward. Walter, you've been more of a father to me than my own ever was. Watching you be patient, strategic, protect your family, it taught me what real integrity looks like. My throat tightened. You don't owe me anything. I owe you everything. And wherever I go, whatever I build in Atlanta, I'm going to live well. For both of us. For Dorothy, too. I stood, pulled him into a hug. 2 men who'd survived a war together. Live well, I whispered. For all of us. After Kenneth left, Detective Charles Bennett knocked on the back door 30 minutes later. Walter, got a minute? I let him in. He looked tired. Wanted to give you an update, Bennett said, pulling out a notepad. Brett Sullivan, we issued a warrant. Credit card fraud theft conspiracy. He's somewhere in Texas or Mexico. Either way, he's done in Charleston. And Rachel. Bennett's expression shifted. Legally, she's mostly in the clear. The conspiracy charge won't stick because she never actually acted. But Walter, she's lost everything that matters. He ticked items off. Job terminated, reputation destroyed, husband filing for divorce. Every employer in Charleston has blacklisted her. The trust fund. Your updated will makes it contingent on demonstrated good character. Her attorney confirmed she can't challenge it. She's got nothing. Good. Bennett nodded. Justice isn't always jail time. Sometimes it's watching someone lose everything they sold their soul for. After he left, I climbed to the shop's front window, watched King Street through the glass, tourists walking, couples holding hands, life continuing. Somewhere Kenneth was packing boxes for Atlanta, starting over. Somewhere Rachel sat in wreckage of her own making. And I stood in a shop my wife and I had built 40 years ago, wondering if this had been worth it. Then I remembered Kenneth's words. You saved my life. Dorothy's music box, her warning, her gift. Sometimes to save one person you have to accept hurting another. This was the price of protecting family. The rain had stopped. King Street gleamed wet and clean. Kenneth's car disappeared around the corner, heading toward a future I'd helped make possible. I stood in the window of Hayes's toy restoration, watching Charleston move forward without us. Rachel had chosen money over love. Brett had chosen money over Rachel. Kenneth had chosen freedom over bitterness. And I had chosen truth over comfort. Dorothy used to say I fixed broken things. But some things once broken can't be fixed. They can only be released. Kenneth was free now. Free to build a life without lies, without manipulation, without waiting for the other shoe to drop. That was worth something. That was worth everything. I turned from the window, looked at my workshop stairs, at the toys waiting to be restored, at the life I still had to live. Justice had come. It tasted like goodbye and rain and freedom, but it had come. 2 weeks after the scandal, on a quiet Thursday morning, I sat in my workshop holding the German wooden doll, the one that had hidden Kenneth's photographs, evidence of betrayal sealed inside a hollow torso. I'd opened it that morning, removed everything. Now the doll was just a doll again, empty, waiting to be restored. I was sanding the interior when I heard footsteps on the stairs, hesitant, slow. Rachel stood in the doorway. She looked terrible, no makeup, hair in a messy ponytail, wearing an old College of Charleston sweatshirt. The polished HR manager was gone. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in 2 weeks. "Dad." Her voice barely a whisper. I set down the sandpaper, said nothing. She held up a key, the spare to the shop. "I came to return this. I don't have the right to keep it anymore." She set it on my workbench, her hand shaking. "Is that all?" I asked quietly. Rachel's face crumpled. She sank into the chair, the same one Kenneth had used years ago. I don't know what to say. Tears ran down her face, real tears. "I spent 3 years waiting for you to die, and now I wish I was the one who disappeared." I said nothing, just listened. Brett's gone. Kenneth's gone. My job's gone. Everyone knows what I did. She looked at her hands. "And I deserve all of it." "Yes," I said simply. "You do." She flinched. "But," I continued, picking up the doll, "your mother left you something. $1.2 million. It's still there." Rachel looked up, confused. "It's not for the woman who plotted her father's death. It's for the daughter who learns to value people over money." I set down the doll. "The trust has conditions now. You can't touch it for 5 years, and only if you've demonstrated real character." 5 years. 5 years to prove you've changed, to rebuild without shortcuts or manipulation. I met her eyes. "To become someone your mother would recognize." "What if I can't?" I gestured at the shelves of damaged toys. "I've spent 40 years fixing broken things. Some take days, some take years. But everything deserves a second chance. Even me. Especially you," she cried, real shaking sobs. I let her. When she stopped, she wiped her eyes. "I don't know where to start." I pulled down a dusty Victorian dollhouse, set it between us. "Start here. You'll come every Tuesday and Thursday, 2 hours. Help me restore toys. And maybe while we fix broken things, you'll figure out how to fix yourself." Rachel looked at the dollhouse. At me. Why after everything? I thought about Dorothy, about the music box, about 3 years watching my daughter destroy herself. Because you're still my daughter, and because your mother believed in second chances. I wound the music box. La Vie en Rose filled the workshop. Rachel picked up a cloth, started dusting with trembling hands. We worked in silence, the music playing, the building settling around us. Above my workbench, Dorothy's photograph smiled down. I looked at her, at our daughter, at the slow work of restoration beginning. "Can you see it, love? The cracks are starting to heal." My name is Walter Hayes. I'm 66 years old. I fix broken toys. 3 years ago, I discovered my daughter was waiting for me to die. I documented everything, hid evidence in the toys my wife and I had restored together. And on a January night, I played her a recording she never knew existed. I destroyed her life to save it. Now we sit together in a workshop full of broken things, learning what Dorothy always knew, that restoration takes patience, that some breaks heal slowly, that love means protecting people from themselves. Rachel will come back on Tuesday and Thursday and every week after that. She'll sand wood and mix paint and learn that value isn't measured in dollars. The trust fund waits. 5 years. Maybe she'll earn it. Maybe she won't. But she'll have the chance. Dorothy left me a music box and a warning. She knew our daughter would lose her way. She gave me the tools to save her. I spent 3 years destroying a lie. Now I'll spend the rest of my life rebuilding a truth. Slowly, carefully, one broken piece at a time. Because every broken thing deserves a second chance. Even us. My name is Walter Hayes. I'm 66 years old. If you've listened to my story, I hope you never have to live it. Don't be like me, forced to spend 3 years documenting your own child's betrayal. Don't wait until greed replaces love. Don't let silence become complicity. Here's what I learned: God gives us tools we don't understand until we need them. Dorothy left me that music box 17 years ago. I didn't know why, but God knew. He prepared me for a battle I couldn't see coming. God sees what we refuse to see. I wanted to believe Rachel would change on her own. But God showed me truth through Kenneth's pain, through Brett's greed, through Rachel's own words. Sometimes love means accepting hard truths, and God grants second chances we don't deserve. Rachel lost everything, but she's still breathing, still capable of change, still my daughter. That's grace I can't fully understand, but I'm learning to accept. My advice: don't let money poison your family. Don't confuse wealth with worth. If you see someone losing their way, speak up. Act. Don't wait 3 years like I did. Some things once broken can't be fully restored, but they can be rebuilt. Slowly. With patience. With faith that broken pieces still have purpose. Thank you for staying through this entire journey. If this story made you think or feel something real, drop a 2 below so I know you were here. Quick note: this narrative contains dramatized elements designed for reflection. If it's not your style, no problem, find what speaks to you. But if it resonated, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if